She trusted the chain of command until the folder the chief proudly held turned out to be her death sentence in disguise. Now, with subpoena, WA 182, and a midnight SIM card call pointing to the unthinkable, the evidence locker whispers secrets no one was supposed to hear. The briefing room smelled like burnt coffee and ink, cheap, overused toner from the printer humming in the corner, and that ever-present scent of tired ambition. I stood by the whiteboard, holding my breath longer than necessary, watching my own handwriting smudge under the projector's glow. My name was on the case file. My initials were on every summary. But what I saw today didn't match what I wrote. It started when I opened the last report from the stack. Just routine at first. Timestamps, officer signatures, badge numbers. But something about the witness statement felt off. I'd interviewed her myself. Her voice had cracked when she described the scream. Now it read like a legal memo. Precise, soulless, perfect grammar. Not her. Not even close. Detective Moreno? HR called me down 15 minutes later. My name was flagged in a cross-departmental Excel sheet. Again? Just protocol, they said. Random compliance check. But the timing was too sharp, like a blade pressed flat against skin. When I returned to my desk, the envelope was already there. No stamp, no markings, just my last name written in red pen. Inside, one item, a SIM card, no note, no instructions, just a number etched in tiny font on a post-it, 1:17 a.m. incoming. That wasn't just a call, that was a lifeline or a trap. By noon, my nerves had developed their own HR policy. Full collapse, no notice required. The folder from the chief's office was already making rounds. He walked out with it like a proud parent at graduation. I signed every report, he told the press when they asked about the leaked evidence. We stand by our integrity. Integrity had a nasty aftertaste these days. I took the SIM to forensics, said it was related to an older case. I lied, a little. Officer Quinn raised an eyebrow but plugged it in. One voicemail, 32 seconds. A voice I hadn't heard in months. The witness, whispering, crying. And then, they're changing the files. It's not what I said. They made me cut, nothing else. It hit like cold water down my spine. The timeline was collapsing. Everything I'd worked on for the past 5 months was stitched with lies. And if that voicemail got out, someone would burn, not just careers, but reputations, maybe freedom. I pulled my access log history, just for curiosity, I told myself. At 2:03 a.m., my badge had accessed the evidence locker. Except I was asleep. Alone. At home. My cat could alibi me if she ever learned to speak, which meant either the system was hacked or someone had cloned my ID. I sent a request to IT for the surveillance logs from that night. They said the system was under maintenance. Of course it was. At the same time, my email login pinged from an internal IP I'd never used, 20 minutes after I'd supposedly accessed the locker. And still, the chief kept smiling, kept sipping his awful coffee, kept waving that folder like a shield. The post-it with the number now felt heavier than the whole damn case file. I stared at it under the harsh office lights, then turned to my drawer. Inside, sealed in evidence tape, was my personal copy of the initial briefing draft, the one I'd printed, the one with the witness's real words. And right there, in the margins, was my handwriting, a note I'd made in pen months ago. If this ever disappears, follow the voice. The voice had returned, and someone was already trying to bury it. I called her number. The phone rang 5 times before the automated message kicked in. This mailbox is full and cannot accept new messages. My fingers tightened around the receiver, as if squeezing it harder would force a different outcome. She was alive at 1:17 a.m. She had made that call. She had whispered the truth. And now, nothing. Just digital silence and a box full of unsent cries for help. I needed to know who had access to her, who coached her, who changed her words. My next move wasn't authorized. I took my badge, jacket, and a clean flash drive and headed down to the old tech lab in the sub-basement. Most of the department forgot it existed. That's why I trusted it. Dust clung to every surface. The fluorescent lights flickered like they were afraid of what they'd seen. I found an unused terminal, plugged in the SIM, and ran a mirrored trace. The signal pinged off 3 towers, but what mattered was where it landed. An unregistered device, piggybacking off a restricted internal channel. The trace led back to the south wing, the administrative floor, HR. That's when I remembered. The compliance check, that Excel sheet, the way they asked for my password, not directly, of course. Just a quick screen share, just a collaboration. But the worst part? The file I pulled from the terminal had metadata, timestamps, editors, access logs. The witness statement had been opened, modified, and closed 5 times in 2 days. Once by me, 4 times by a user listed only as Chief Approval Ext. I knew that protocol. It meant an override, an external signature clearance granted only to top-level admin during public crisis events. But we weren't in a crisis. We were in a cover-up. I printed the metadata and sealed it into an evidence bag. Subpoena, Welvan A2, was already prepped, originally meant for a minor asset tracking complaint, but the language was wide enough to include digital tampering. I repurposed it. My name went on the line. Then I went to see the chief. He stood behind his desk, sipping his usual blend of arrogance and hazelnut creamer. The blinds were drawn. The air was thick with that artificial silence people wear when they're lying too close to the truth. "You look tired, detective," he said, not looking up. "I need a signature," I said, holding the folder out. He raised an eyebrow and opened it lazily, like it bored him already. Then he saw the subpoena. "I already signed every report," he muttered. "I'm sure you did," I said. "That's why you'll have no problem signing this." He didn't move, didn't blink, just stared at the printed log showing his override clearance. The SIM card was in the folder too, nestled between sheets of official issue arrogance. Then I showed him the photo, security footage I scraped from a printer log camera. A man, his build, using my badge to enter the locker room at 2:03 a.m. His face turned just enough to cast doubt, but the coat, department issue. The gait, too familiar. "This is forgery," I said softly. He looked up at me. "That's a serious accusation." "And this is a serious subpoena," I said, tapping the folder. His silence cracked. "You're going to cancel the briefing," I added, stepping closer, lowering my voice. "Because if you don't, that SIM card goes public." His eyes flicked to the door. But he didn't move. Not yet. Not while I was still standing. If the chief signs now, the whole story collapses. If he refuses, it gets louder. Either way, I just kicked the hornet's nest, and someone will make sure I pay for it. When power hides behind protocol, someone has to pull the curtain. Hit like if you'd stand up too and share your thoughts below. Subpoena. Welvan A2 is just the beginning. The room didn't explode, but the silence thickened into something I could almost choke on. The chief closed the folder with precision, like sealing a casket. His jaw tensed. His fingers rested lightly on the cover as if feeling for any movement inside. He didn't look at me. Instead, he turned to the window, where the blinds remained closed, letting only slivers of artificial light slash across his face. "I hope you understand," he said finally, "what you've done." I stood straighter. "I understand exactly. I followed the voice. The same one you tried to erase." That got him. He turned slowly, measured. "You think you're protecting her. but you're risking everything this department has built." "No," I said. "You're risking it. I'm documenting it." I left the folder on his desk, walked out without another word. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from fury. There was a SIM card with a witness's cry, a digital fingerprint in the metadata, and a 2:03 a.m. access log with my badge, fabricated to make me complicit. They'd wanted a scapegoat. Instead, they got a subpoena. By the time I reached my desk, IT had responded. The security footage from the evidence locker corridor was unavailable due to scheduled maintenance, time-stamped the exact moment my badge had been used. Convenient. Except someone forgot about the second camera in the hallway near the printer, the one I'd tapped into earlier that week for a different case. I pulled it again, still rolling, still stored locally. I scrubbed through the feed. There, 2:02, 11 a.m., a tall figure with a hat pulled low, walking fast. He paused outside the locker room door, pulled a keycard from his coat. The coat's ID badge was clearly visible. I zoomed, froze, enhanced, badge, visitor, name, redacted. But the name wasn't the point. The timestamp in the video matched the forged access log, and the person who granted that visitor-level clearance also in the metadata. Chief approval, temporary external consultant access, emergency override. The system was eating itself alive with its own receipts. I burned copies, printed, encrypted, double-backed, sent one to internal affairs, one to the prosecutor's office with subpoena, SAW 1182 attached. I knew I was being watched, so I made sure they saw it. Let them scramble. At 4:17 p.m., the official email hit our inboxes. Subject, briefing canceled. Body, due to ongoing verification of documentation protocols and data inconsistencies, the 5 p.m. briefing is canceled until further notice. I leaned back in my chair. Outside, a storm was starting to roll in, the kind that hums through glass and makes you feel like something ancient is waking up. Someone knocked once, then twice. HR, 2 people, blazers, plastic smiles. "Detective Moreno," the woman said sweetly. "We're here to escort you to a reassignment hearing, effective immediately." I didn't move, just looked at her ID badge, and smiled. "You'll want to log this one," I said. "Chain of custody starts now." Because they could strip my title. They could try to bury the story. But they couldn't erase the SIM card, the subpoena, or the way the chief had paused. That hesitation had already told me everything. They walked me down the hallway like I was radioactive. HR flanked me on both sides, clipboard in one hand, walkie-talkie in the other, pretending this was standard procedure. No cuffs, no raised voices, just tight smiles and an undercurrent of tension so sharp it could slice through laminated policy manuals. As we passed the bullpen, heads turned, no one said anything. That was worse than whispers, worse than judgment. Silence in this building didn't mean peace. It meant fear. They were calculating the cost of looking too long, of caring too much. I saw it in their eyes. The reassignment hearing took place in Conference Room C, the one they use for performance evaluations and quiet terminations. The table had been cleared of everything but a pitcher of warm water and 3 neatly stacked legal pads. One for me, one for the panel, one for record-keeping purposes. A man I didn't recognize sat at the head. Civilian clothes, unlabeled laptop. He didn't introduce himself, just gestured for me to sit. "Detective Moreno," he said, folding his hands. "You've been temporarily reassigned to desk review pending further investigation." "Investigation of what?" I asked, though I already knew. "The unauthorized access of digital evidence," he replied calmly, as if reading from a well-rehearsed script. "Use of department resources without command approval, and the release of confidential metadata to an external entity." I smiled. You mean internal affairs? His expression didn't change. You mean the folder you walked into the chief's office with? He asked. So they knew. They were watching everything. I leaned forward. You're missing something, I said. The system flagged the evidence, not me. All I did was follow the trail. The man gave a slow blink. Your SIM card, the voicemail, the edits to the witness transcript, those could all be explained. Forgery can't, I said. He paused, just a flicker, but I caught it. Who signed the override? I asked. He didn't answer. Instead, he pushed a blank form toward me. This is your transfer agreement. It acknowledges your cooperation with the reassignment while the inquiry is conducted. And if I don't sign it? His voice remained perfectly even. Then your refusal will be noted in your personnel file, alongside the security flag on your badge. There it was, the quiet threat, wrapped in bureaucracy and scented with toner. I took the pen, clicked it once, and wrote across the top in red ink, subpoena, Levenantiu, enforced, no further statement without counsel. I slid it back. The civilian's smile faltered, just slightly. On my way out, I passed by the server room and caught sight of Officer Quinn, the only tech analyst I halfway trusted. She didn't say anything, just slid a USB into my coat pocket as we brushed shoulders. Sleight of hand, old habit from cadet days. Back at my desk, I plugged it in. One file, audio, a short clip. It was the chief, not in the office, not in a meeting. It was him at 2:03 a.m. Make sure she's locked out. If she sees the original, it's over. My breath caught. No more guesswork, no more shadows. His voice, his words. I encrypted the file, sent it to the legal team at Internal Affairs with the subject line, chain of custody, voicemail evidence, evidence locker incident. I had no badge now, no case, no office. But I had the truth, and I wasn't going to let it die quietly. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I sat in the archives room, 2 floors below where they expected me to vanish. The lights were dim, one of them flickering above like a warning. I left it on anyway. Let them know someone was still breathing down here. The air smelled like old toner, plastic file covers, and cold dust, the kind that's never disturbed because people forget places like this exist. But this room had one thing I needed: silence, the kind that lets you think clearly. Piece together a puzzle that's trying to rewrite itself while you're still holding the original corners. I opened the sealed envelope Quinn had slipped into my pocket. Inside, more than I expected. 3 printed access logs, 1 backup of the chief's 2:03 a.m. audio, and a snapshot of the evidence locker digital gatekeeping report. It showed 4 failed badge entries before the system registered a successful override. Failed attempts. Someone didn't have access, not at first, which meant someone was desperate. I cross-referenced the timestamps. While my ID was supposedly unlocking the door, a secondary process was running in the background. Admin protocol. Manual override. Quinn had underlined that one. Not standard, not departmental. That required external access, the kind only IT command or the chief's personal consultant could authorize. There was no mistake anymore. They didn't just forge documents, they forged identities. Mine. Suddenly, my phone buzzed. A message, no contact name, just a number. Don't trust IA. He's in deep. He picked the panel himself. M. I froze. M. It couldn't be. She had disappeared 2 months ago. The original witness. The one whose SIM card I now carried like a weapon. If she was alive, then this wasn't just a cover-up. It was a chessboard, and I'd only just now seen the full game. I texted back. Where are you? 3 dots appeared, then stopped. Then a second message arrived. Proof in your briefing binder, page 4, bottom margin. I dug through my personal locker, found the black binder I used for field prep. I hadn't opened it in weeks, too many ghosts. Page 4 was my witness summary, old draft. At the bottom, in pencil, so faint I'd missed it before. If you see this, I ran. Second locker, under floorboard, green tag. That locker had been sealed since my first year. Half the department thought it was just a ventilation shaft. I grabbed my key ring. It still had the master set. I made my way down. Quiet. Quick. The hallway was empty. The only sound the hum of the vending machine and the slow flick, flick, flick of the dying light over the door. Locker 227. I pried it open. Nothing. At first. Then I saw it. The floor panel was cracked slightly on the edge. I lifted it carefully. A small metal box. Inside, one flash drive, one handwritten letter, one green evidence tag with the words, "Initial interview, do not file." I plugged the drive into my secured laptop. Video. Shaky. Time-stamped weeks ago. Her. The witness. Talking. Crying. And someone else beside her. Face turned away, but the voice clear. The chief. He was coaching her, telling her exactly what to say, what not to say, threatening her with what would happen if she confused her statement. 38 minutes of buried proof, unedited, raw, and all of it, now, in my hands. They reassigned me, silenced me, but the truth had a pulse again, and I was going to make sure it was loud. The morning came without sunlight, just a haze that clung to the city like the breath of something that didn't want to be seen. I walked through it anyway, binder in my bag, the flash drive taped inside my jacket. Every step toward internal affairs felt like threading a needle through a minefield. But I had no choice. I'd already submitted the voicemail. Now I had the video. 38 minutes of unfiltered truth. The kind that didn't just ruin reputations, it rewrote the narrative. IA's office was on the 9th floor, tucked behind layers of clearance and corridors lined with plaques about integrity. I scanned my badge. The red light flashed. Denied? Again. Denied. Then, a moment later, the security officer behind the desk lifted the glass panel and gave me a tight smile. "You've been locked out, detective." I forced a breath. "Since when?" "Since last night. Full system reset. You're listed as inactive." They wanted me invisible, non-existent. It wasn't just a desk reassignment. It was a digital erasure, a deletion masked as administrative efficiency. But I came prepared. I handed him a sealed envelope. Chain of custody notice. Subpoena, Kambyawan Ne 2 attached. IA is still legally obligated to receive evidence. The officer hesitated, read the header, then picked up the phone. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Then a woman in a gray suit appeared. Detective Lara Ortiz, IA senior review officer. Sharp heels, sharper eyes. We'd never worked a case together, but she was known for one thing, unpleasant truths delivered with immaculate diction. "Walk with me," she said. We moved through the side hallway, no words, just the rhythmic click of her heels and the steady beat of my heart trying to warn me, don't trust too quickly. She led me to a private room, no cameras, just one glass wall and a thick file folder sitting in the center of the table. "Before you speak," she said, "I need you to know something." I waited. "The chief has already filed a formal complaint against you, alleging data manipulation, procedural sabotage, obstruction." Of course he had. "And yet," she continued, flipping the folder open, "he also submitted 3 conflicting statements in the last 24 hours. The most recent one retracts the first 2. Sloppy, desperate, perfect." I slid the flash drive across the table. "This will explain why." She plugged it in, opened the video file, and let it play. No edits, no narration, just the raw conversation. The chief's voice, his threats, her tears, the falsified script he fed her line by line. Ortiz didn't blink, just listened until it ended. Then she closed the laptop, quietly. I'll need to verify this with legal counsel and with our compliance unit. You do that, I said. I've already sent a duplicate to the prosecutor's office. Chain of custody is logged under my name and subpoena. Mol 182. Her eyes flicked up, calculating, respectful now. You realize what you've just done, she said. Not yet, I answered, but I'm about to. Back downstairs, my phone buzzed. Unknown number, voicemail. I played it. You've made a mistake. You should have taken the transfer. No voice, just that. Then static. They were warning me. But it was too late for warnings. They forged reports. They forged identities. And now, they were about to face something real. I walked out of the IA building and into a city that suddenly felt foreign. Everything looked the same. Street signs, buses hissing to a stop, vendors selling coffee from carts too small to be trusted. But I knew better now. The system wasn't broken. It was designed this way. The silence, the denials, the paper trails that looped back into nothing. It all worked perfectly for them. I caught my reflection in the window of a patrol car parked across the street. Same badge clipped to my coat, same ID swinging from my lanyard. But none of it meant anything anymore. The truth I carried was now heavier than my title. My next move had to be public. I walked into the municipal courthouse and requested a secure drop with the district integrity unit. It was rare, almost ceremonial. But legal protocol allowed it, especially in cases involving internal misconduct, forgery, or compromised subpoena execution. The clerk looked at the flash drive and raised an eyebrow. This is in connection with the briefing cancellation, she asked. More than that, I said. It explains why the briefing was a lie to begin with. She stamped the envelope. I signed the log. Moreno, evidence locker access forgery complaint, chain of custody, sealed. From there, things moved fast. By 3:15 p.m., I got a call from a withheld number. You've stirred up something you can't control, the voice said. Male, older, slight rasp. We have people everywhere, don't forget that. But I wasn't afraid anymore, because when the system tries to hide something that deep, its roots rot from the inside, and all you have to do is shine the right light to watch the whole thing collapse. I took the long way back to my apartment, quiet streets, cheap bookstores, corners where nothing ever happens until something does. I kept looking over my shoulder, but not from fear, from calculation, because now they knew I wouldn't back down. They tried to erase me with bad metadata, forged access logs, and a SIM card they never thought would resurface. But I had the voice, the real words, the truth behind subpoena. 182. And still, part of me couldn't let go of the question that started all of this. Why her? Why the witness? Why fake a case so thoroughly? The answer had to be bigger than departmental reputation. It had to be tied to something or someone they were protecting. I opened my binder again. Back page, stapled to the inside cover. Something I hadn't seen before. A photo. Black and white. Surveillance still. The witness. With a man in uniform. Not the chief, someone else. The signature at the bottom. Blacked out. Except one word remained in blue ink. Deputy. And suddenly, the entire narrative twisted. This wasn't just about one forged report. It was about why it had to be forged. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I stared at the surveillance photo until dawn bled through the blinds, slicing my room into gray stripes of suspicion. The image wasn't grainy. It wasn't old. It was deliberate, placed in my binder like a ghost whispering, Look again. You missed the real story. The man next to the witness, he wasn't just any officer. He was Deputy Director Cole Vance, head of operations and longtime friend of the chief. Medals, commendations, public trust campaigns with smiling kids and polished boots. The kind of man who only appeared in our building when he wanted to remind people who was really in charge. Why would she be with him? Why would he be present at a witness interview? My stomach sank. They weren't just trying to hide a mistake. They were manufacturing a narrative from the beginning. Every form, every report, every "I signed every report" speech was part of a carefully crafted facade. But the surveillance footage told the truth, and now I had it. I made 3 new copies of the drive. One went into a bank deposit box, one into Quinn's hands. The third? I walked it across town to a reporter I trusted. Barely. Her name was Lana Trevino. We'd met years ago when she was covering gang cases. She didn't flinch easily. When I handed her the drive, she didn't ask questions, just nodded, slipped it into her coat and said, "You know you're going to lose your badge for this." I nodded. Better than losing my spine. Back at the precinct, the atmosphere had shifted. Doors that used to open with a nod now clicked shut. Eyes that once looked me in the face now found the floor fascinating. Even the coffee tasted different, burnt, bitter, like someone had finally given up pretending we were all on the same side. I knew internal affairs was circling. Ortiz hadn't called me back. No updates, no acknowledgments, which meant one of 2 things. She was building a case quietly, or she was already being silenced. So I went back to the place where everything unraveled. The evidence locker. Not through the front, through the lower access tunnel, an old, unused maintenance hall that once connected the archives to the armory. Few people knew it existed. Fewer still had the old master key. I unlocked the gate, flashlight in hand, heart hammering so hard I thought it might echo. The locker's digital panel still glowed. I entered my badge ID, red. Then I entered the forged ID from the 2:03 a.m. breach, the one used by the visitor, green, access granted. Inside, the air was cooler, drier, the scent of metal and plastic, rows of sealed bins, labeled with marker and fading stickers. I went to Section 4B, where the witness's case materials should have been. Empty, clean, erased, no box, no tag, no digital signature, but wedged in the back corner of the bottom shelf was a torn evidence tag. Green, the same green as the one hidden beneath the floorboard. But this one had blood on it, dried, old, and a fingerprint smudge. I didn't need a lab to tell me whose it was. It matched the chief's thumbprint. That's when I heard the click behind me, the unmistakable sound of the door locking shut. My breath caught. A voice came through the intercom, calm, unhurried. "You should have taken the transfer, Moreno." And then the lights went out. I stood in the dark, the air pressing in like a second skin. No phone signal, no exit, just rows of sealed metal bins and the metallic scent of cold betrayal. The voice on the intercom had disappeared, replaced by a silence that screamed louder than anything I'd heard that week. I didn't panic, not yet. I took slow breaths and slid to the floor, back against the metal shelf. My fingers moved without light, tracing the green tag, careful not to smear the blood. If they wanted to trap me here, fine. But they'd made one mistake. They'd locked me inside the evidence, and I never leave without a record. From my coat, I pulled the pocket recorder I'd used for interviews, always on, always backed up. It was still running, still catching every word spoken since I entered. I slipped it into a metal bin with an old tracking chip, hoping the signal would spike once I got out. If I got out, that's when I heard the faintest sound. Footsteps, not boots, not heels, soft, careful, coming from the far end of the storage rows. Someone else was in here. I stayed low, pressed into shadow. Then a whisper. "Moreno?" I almost didn't recognize it. She stepped into the pale emergency glow near the door, the witness, alive, shaking, holding a flashlight like a weapon. "I came back for the tag," she said, "but it's gone." I held it up. Not gone, just blood-stained. Her shoulders collapsed in silent relief. Then panic returned. "We have 5 minutes. That door locks on a cycle. If they rerouted the circuit, it won't open again until morning." 5 minutes. I followed her through a side panel I hadn't noticed before. It led to an old utility shaft, just wide enough to crawl through, just long enough to feel like a death sentence. "Why now?" I asked as we moved. "Because Deputy Vance knows," she whispered. "He thought killing the report was enough, but when the chief ordered a second fake witness to replace me, I knew I had to run." "They tried to replace you?" She nodded. "The girl who showed up on briefing day wasn't me, just someone with the same name, a clean record, a borrowed badge number. They didn't just forge the story, they rewrote the people in it." We emerged in the boiler corridor where everything smelled like rust and old water. I locked the door behind us and slipped the green tag into a plastic pouch. Then I asked the question that had haunted me since I saw the photo. "Why was Vance with you that day?" She stopped, turned, and then, softly, "Because he's the one who started it. He's the one I saw, the scream I reported. It was him." My blood turned to ice. "You witnessed Vance committing the crime?" "Yes," she said, "and the chief's been cleaning up for him ever since." Everything clicked. The forgery, the false access logs, the canceled briefing. Subpoena under 1182 wasn't about me. It was a shield. And now, it was a sword. Back at the apartment, I made one last upload. All files, all recordings, one encrypted drive, sent directly to the prosecutor with the subject line: "Chain of custody confirmed. Do not let this die in a drawer." Then I turned to her. "You're not safe." She shook her head. "Neither are you." We both knew it was true, but for the first time in weeks, I felt something stronger than fear. Conviction. I reached for my badge, still clipped, still mine, and said quietly, "If they want to bury this, they better bring a backhoe." 3 days later, they called an emergency press conference. Not to honor me, not to admit guilt, but to clarify the status of ongoing departmental reviews regarding recent procedural inconsistencies. The chief didn't speak. He wasn't there. Deputy Vance either. Both were placed on medical leave, a phrase that meant exactly nothing and everything at once. But I was there, not at the podium, not in the spotlight. I stood in the back, arms folded, watching the machine try to eat its own tail. The prosecutor's office had received the files, every minute of footage, every access log, every chain of custody entry marked with my name and signed with a date they couldn't alter. Subpoena. 1182 wasn't just executed. It detonated. Internal Affairs reopened the case. The fake witness vanished. The original one, alive, breathing, testifying, was placed in protective custody. Under my request, I lost my desk. My badge ID was permanently flagged. I wasn't reassigned, I was sidelined. But I never cared about the title. I cared about the truth, and for the first time the city cared too. Lana's story hit the front page the next morning. Forgery, fraud, and a fingerprint. How one detective unlocked the department's secret case. It wasn't poetry, but it was proof. Officer Quinn was promoted. IA Officer Ortiz transferred to the federal task force, her reward for playing it straight in a crooked room. And me? I walk the city now in plain clothes, a quiet name in loud coffee shops, watching the department rebrand itself through new posters and hollow promises. But I keep the SIM card, the original voicemail, and the green tag framed above my kitchen sink. Because I know how this game works. They'll forget me, they'll rebuild, they'll polish new faces and offer new slogans, but there's always someone watching. And if the locker doors ever open at 2:03 a.m. again, I'll be ready, because I never left, and they'll never see me coming.